Welcome to Character in Action with Matthew J. Norcross, the official podcast of the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation. Come journey with us on the real-life stories of character in action. And now here's your host, Matthew J. Norcross.
Welcome to Character in Action from the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation. I'm Matthew J. Norcross here in the studio with Richard Shannon. Hey, Richard.
Hey, how are you?
Doing good. Now, I am really excited because today's guest joins us from Sydney, Australia. His name is Andrew Macaulay, and he's the CEO of a company called Doraid, which provides consulting services on government relations in APAC, corporate restructuring, turnaround strategic planning, and customers are primarily based in Australia, navigating highly regulated entry paths. Andrew joins us now over the phone. Andrew, thanks for being on the show.
Well, Matthew, good morning from Australia, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great honour to be on your show. I've listened to all of your podcasts, and I feel very much like I am a minnow amongst some very significant people that you've had on your show.
Yeah. So before we get started, can you please tell our listeners more about yourself?
Certainly. Firstly, I'm a husband to a beautiful wife. I've been married for a quarter of a century. I'm father to 2 sons, one of whom is at university studying agribusiness, and the other one is in the Australian Army. And after that, I guess I'm a son, and we're an immigrant family. My parents are from overseas. My father is a Kiwi and my mother is American. So we grew up, my 2 brothers and myself grew up as a very close family in Australia with no relatives. And I've been involved in business and international commerce, primarily in Asia, since I left university.
Yeah, that's a great resume that you got, isn't it, Richard?
Absolutely. I'm definitely impressed.
Yeah, it's definitely a legacy, that's for sure. So how do you define character?
Well, character is the core of who you are, Matthew. Mm-hmm. Character is something that comes from the soul. It defines your instinctive reactions to things, the difference between right and wrong, how you'll treat others, and it may be seen as a truism, but it is the way you behave when others don't see you. It gets to the core of your integrity.
Yeah, and integrity is incredibly important when it comes to character, and you hit right in the nail that it's the difference between right and wrong. That's for sure, isn't it, Richard?
Yes. Yeah, because you can have, there's no such thing as no character. In some sense, you can have good character and bad character, and that the good and bad is determined morally.
No, and if I could expand on that, I'd say we learn this. And the Jesuits made a great comment that you give me the child and I'll give you the man at 7. There is so much to be said about what you learn from your parents, your mother and your father. For a young man, it's very much from a father, that influence, and that guides you in the development of your character. We are fortunate in our societies, in the United States and in Australia, that the basis of our democracy and our rule of law comes from the Judeo-Christian tradition, which has integrity at its core.
Yeah, you were saying that this was part of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and it's something that unfortunately we've been losing a lot of track of. That's for sure.
It's one of the great issues in our society that the secularism of our society creates a false sense of morality. With morality with no foundation, it is vague at best. and adaptive. And that is what we're seeing across our society, with a failure to understand basic things like what the role of a man and a woman is, the importance of discipline in the family and in the community. All of these things are eroded, and our society is diminished when we lose track of the fundamentals that faith give us.
I usually have the, I guess sometimes a shortcoming in thinking that everywhere in the world is just like America. But are you saying that's the same way, or the same things you're seeing even in Australia?
Yeah, what you're seeing in the United States is happening around the Western world. Democracies around the world are being challenged by valueless progressive elites who want to mould a world into something that is, in many instances, amoral. We've just passed laws in New South Wales that allow abortion until very nearly birth. We've passed laws about assisted dying that really, the case studies around the world show us ultimately are distorted and abused. All of these things go against the laws of nature.
Yeah. So please tell us a story of witnessing, either in person or in history, someone that was a true phoenix, someone that was a role model, leading by example and making the world a better place.
Well, role models are great, aren't they? And in the United States, you've had some great ones, but I'm going to make that somewhat personal, because I could take some great public leaders, but as a CEO of company, I've been privileged to have chairman of the boards of a couple of companies who have been genuine change agents and men of character. And in the last organisation I joined as CEO, it was a basket case. It had some serious problems. It needed turnaround. And the chairman, the new chairman of that organisation, was a man who used his strength of character to make significant change for the rated in fact represented. Is the peak body for the print and packaging industry in Australia. It provided services and represented that industry to government at every level, and it was floundering. This chairman came in, and through his personal integrity, his strength of character, and his focus on an altruistic service to the community, and in his case, the community was this industry and this organisation, he created an environment in which his board could thrive and overcome the internecine problems that it had been experiencing, and me as the CEO could thrive and drive the organisation forward and reform it and make it stronger than it has ever been.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing a personal story, just because I know sometimes it's easier to pick out something. So thanks for making that choice.
When you see somebody who operates for the good of others at a level like that, it's genuinely empowering.
Yeah.
I want to make sure to remember that.
Yeah. So please share with us a moment that stands out in your mind, something big or even the slightest gesture that was a transformative Phoenix moment, one where you knew you had a significant impact on an individual's life or on a group of people.
Yeah, I can. much of my working life, Matthew, has been in Asia. I've been the senior executive for large listed New York Stock Exchange companies or NASDAQ companies or Australian Stock Exchange companies in Asia, running business, very dispersed business operations up there. And one of the things that I found that was most transformative was empowering young people to succeed and achieve their best. And that was the best results I ever achieved in my organisations were when I empowered young people who were not necessarily going to get a chance elsewhere, young people who hadn't proven themselves, and what I gave them the opportunity and the platform to do was to step out and change the world. And in those businesses, I now see young men who are senior executives around the world who have grown and thrived as a result of the responsibility and authority that I gave them as very young people.
Yeah, that's actually a great story. And speaking of responsibility, that's actually the first character trait I would like to explore this week. Now, from your perspective as a business executive, what does responsibility mean to you?
Well, responsibility, first, before you get to being the business executive, it's responsibility to yourself and your obligations to yourself and your family and your community. If you don't exhibit personal responsibility, you're never going to be able to exhibit responsibility in an organisation, because responsibility is an innate understanding of your obligation to others, your role in a mutual commitment to, in my case, firstly to my wife, secondly to my children, thirdly to my community, and in the sense of my employment, to the shareholders through the board of the organisation that I'm the leader of.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
When you were talking about your responsibility towards your wife and then your children, was that intentional, or do you see that as almost in some sense the same type of responsibility, or was I just...
Matthew, you broke up just there. Say again?
Oh, when you were talking about responsibility, you shared how you had a responsibility to your wife and then your children. Did you say that intentionally, as in you have a separate type of responsibility for them, or is it the same?
Well, you have a responsibility as a father to your household, and and together as a couple, you have a responsibility to your children until they leave home. As it happens, my children are still at home because they're still, the one in the army is less so, but he's still, he's only just leaving us. The one at university is still part of our household. So together, my wife and I have a responsibility to him. And so, yes, I put it in that structural sense that you build and grow. You leave your family to cleave to your wife. In the old King James Version, cleave being the operative word, and you create a new family. And that's what I'm referring to there, the responsibility that then flows from that and becomes the basis on which you build other things.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that clarification.
Yeah, you were perfectly clear with that. So another trait I would like to explore is fairness. Now, how would you define fairness, And how would you want people to demonstrate this trait, both in their professional and their personal lives?
Well, isn't it interesting? Fairness has been confused in modern politics and our current society as some sort of equality of outcomes. But that's not what fairness is. Fairness is really, and again from the Bible, we have the very simple adjunct to treat others as you would have others treat you. That's the basis of fairness. Fairness implies a level of humility, because to be fair to others, you need to humble yourself enough to understand their position. Again, we have multiple biblical adjuncts towards that. Matthew tells us that the first will be last and the last will be first. And Paul tells us that it gives us very strong adjuncts against treating races differently or hierarchies. I mean, he talks about there being no Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free, no male or female. We're all one in Jesus Christ. These are things that come to fairness. Fairness is treating your fellow man with compassion and understanding.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of an old saying that was always said at Phoenix Academy while I was a student there, and that is treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them become what they are capable of becoming. That's a pretty famous saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's move on to caring. And this is a trait that I would also like to explore. And my question is, how do you care for your clients as a business perspective, especially in your role as the CEO of
Doraid. Doraid is a fish.
Yes.
Matthew, and Doraid is a fish, and it's named after the company is actually named after a boat.
Got it.
I love sailing.
So how do you care for your clients as a business executive, especially as your role as the CEO of Doraid?
Okay, it's interesting. It's an interesting question, because how do you care for your clients? This comes caring for your clients to an extent links into responsibility, because you have a responsibility to your client to be delivering whatever it is they want.
Right.
But also, if you're adding value to that relationship, to be delivering what they need. And sometimes in a service-based business, which is where I am, they might not know what they need. They might think they know, but they don't necessarily know. So part of it is understanding them enough and listening enough and having enough empathy that you can get into their shoes. There's an old American Indian saying, I'm not sure if you think you have to use the phrase Native American in the United States now, but it was a wonderful expression about you have to walk a mile in another man's moccasins to understand him. And caring is, in a customer sense, is to that level. It's aligning your customers to your values, though, too. So if I find that if a customer values, it matters very little how much I care. We're never going to be able to have a happy relationship. So part of my caring for my customers is ensuring that I have customers who reciprocate care and value the services that I provide. And I'm very selective in the customers that I take on.
Yeah, that's a good definition of caring.
Yeah, and it definitely, since that last part that you said, how you consider and kind of pick your clients so you know what market and values they have. I know that makes it probably a lot easier.
Yeah, you have to be very clear in what your objectives are and what your personal standards are in caring and delivering services.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I am a small business owner, and the fact that I have to do branding and marketing or different things like that, I definitely want to be sure that I can brand and expose companies that I do share values with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to be promoting and exposing people to stuff that I wouldn't want to see or wouldn't want to agree with.
Right. So yeah, you mentioned the word empathy. That's actually another trait I want to explore with you today. What does empathy mean to you as a business leader?
Well, empathy is critically important. I mean, as I just mentioned in the concept of caring, you can't deliver fairness, or you can't care about other people. You can't develop trust with people if you don't have empathy. Empathy is the understanding of the other person, how they feel, how they're reacting to things. And it's not sympathy. Many people, I find, confuse empathy and sympathy. And empathy is an understanding and, to an extent, a desire to do something about that understanding, to convert that understanding into action. And we, again, and Paul writes extensively about, in not using the word, but talks about being kind to one another, being tender-hearted. He talks about rejoicing together, or mourning together. These are aspects of empathy.
Yeah, Father Joseph Fezio, who was a previous guest of mine, he talked explicitly about the differences between sympathy and empathy, and guys, the way you talked about that is pretty similar to how Father Fezio talked about this subject.
Well, you are talking about a very, very erudite man there. And as I said, I'm just a minnow compared to in terms of thinking, compared to that type of person.
Yeah. So the last character trait I want to explore today, citizenship. Now, what does it mean to you to be a good citizen in this society today?
Okay, citizenship. If we're just talking civics, and I'll come back to civics, but if we're just talking civics, citizenship is relatively easy to define. But in the context, Matthew, of your radio show with Richard, you're looking primarily at character and how that flows from faith, and your contribution. And again, I mean, if we turn to Paul, who's not backwards and forwards in some of his guidance on these things, he's unequivocal that our citizenship is in heaven. It's so the first citizenship, and this then guides your civic citizenship, is the citizenship you have through faith in Jesus Christ, and then that will guide your character, the way you live your life in the community that you live in, which gets to civics, which is involvement in the community, and that changes at the stage of life that you're in. So, as a child, it's in community sport, in Sunday school and youth school. It's in the things that your parents guide you through. As a parent, it is being a contributor, an organizer, a leader, a mentor. So I have over the course of my I've been a rugby union player. I've been a rugby union coach. I've been a rugby union administrator, as an example. Now, these are things that are contributing to us, our society, as part of being a good citizen, being a member of your church, being a member of community groups. One of the things that you indicated in some of our conversations before this call was that you wanted to think about how respect could come into or be rekindled through the use of sport. And I would say that sport is part of citizenship, in the sense that we need interaction with our fellow citizens to be good citizens. We can't be isolated. To quote John Donne, no man is an island.
All right. I'll tell you what, we are about out of time, but it's been a wonderful conversation with you today. Andrew Macaulay, thank you for joining us. It was an honor and a privilege, and we would love to have you on again sometime.
Well, Matthew and Richard, thank you very much, and I wish you both a very good day, and thank you for the privilege of talking to you.
Character in Action is a co-production of the Truth Network and the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation. Your host is me, Matthew J. Norcross. Our producers are Robbie Dillmore and Richard Channon, and our intro is done by Robbie Dillmore. If you like this show, please listen to and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes are posted every Sunday. Thank you for listening, and always remember, everyone can be a phoenix.